It began on a quiet stretch of Route 42, just outside Dayton, Ohio, place where the road is long, the shoulders are wide, and traffic thins to a trickle after 10 p.m. Captain Alana Brooks, a 44-year-old logistics commander in the U.S. Army Reserve, was returning from a late planning session at Fort Moore, 2 hours south. Her government-issued SUV moved steadily under the cold night sky, windows slightly tinted, her mind already transitioning from briefings and troop movements to her family waiting at home. She wasn't speeding, wasn't weaving, wasn't distracted. She was just tired and focused, like most Americans, finishing a long day's work. But not everyone saw her that way. Officer Travis Denton, 39, had parked his cruiser at his usual late-night spot just beyond the city limit. Bored, scrolling through his phone, sipping cold gas station coffee, he was itching for action. Denton had been with the department for nearly 16 years. His record was clean on paper, but inside the squad room, everyone knew he had a temperament, a habit of getting defensive when questioned. So when he noticed the unfamiliar vehicle gliding past black, unmarked, professional, his instincts kicked in. Not protective instincts, but the kind psychologists call fragile dominance. It's a state where someone in power sees every unknown as a threat and every neutral face as defiance. His patrol lights came on before Alana even realized he was behind her. What happened next wasn't captured by dramatic music or frantic shouts. It unfolded with chilling normalcy. Alana pulled over, calm, composed, her hands visible on the wheel, her posture straight. Officer Denton approached, hand grazing his holstered weapon, flashlight aimed square at her eyes. He didn't say hello. He didn't explain. He demanded documents. Alana kept her tone even, asked why she was being stopped. His response cold, clipped, claimed she'd drifted between lanes. He suspected impairment. She wasn't intoxicated, not remotely. She stated her rank, mentioned the federal plates, handed over ID slowly, deliberately. He scoffed, told her rank didn't matter out here, then told her to step out of the car. This wasn't just a traffic stop. It was a cultural collision, a psychological test, a moment thick with unspoken history of power dynamics, of black women navigating public space, of authority unchecked and trained professionalism ignored. What Alana did next was not reactionary, it was tactical. She pressed record. Her phone captured everything. The field test, the tone in his voice, his refusal to de-escalate, and the slow unraveling of his confidence when she complied perfectly. She didn't resist, didn't escalate. She passed the test. He wrote a ticket anyway. But what Denton didn't know, what he couldn't imagine, was that this moment, this ordinary act of misconduct, was about to become public and viral. Not because she raised her voice, but because she didn't. This wasn't just a stop. This was a reckoning, quiet, strategic, and coming with consequences he never saw coming. Officer Travis Denton didn't give the traffic stop another thought. To him, it was just another late-night interaction, logged and dismissed, tucked away between call-ins about loose dogs and noise complaints. The paperwork was routine: failure to maintain lane, possible signs of impairment, no arrest. He uploaded the Bodycam footage, docked the device, and moved on. But that's exactly where the real story began. For Denton, the badge had long been a shieldone that made him feel untouchable. In his mind, respect wasn't something you earned. It was something people owed you. 16 years of patrolling had etched that belief deep. He had learned how to survive in the system, how to make just enough effort to stay clear of official reprimand, and how to spin complaints into misunderstandings. And for years, it worked. His colleagues knew his temper, but they also knew he filed his reports, showed up on time, took the tough calls. In the locker room, no one called him out. Not really. That kind of silence, the quiet complicity of peer culture, is what researchers call institutional drift, when norms slowly shift until misconduct feels like business as usual. But back at Fort Moore, Captain Alana Brooks was writing a different kind of report. She wasn't emotional. She wasn't reactive. She was methodical. The moment she returned to base, she sat down with her legal advisor and began documenting everything time of the stop. Officer Denton's tone, her compliance, the unnecessary field sobriety test. She attached her phone's video footage, requested access to the Bodycam file, and filed formal complaints with both the Ohio Department of Public Safety and the Department of Defense Inspector General. This wasn't about ego. It was about precedent. She had spent over 2 decades training soldiers to stay calm under fire, to lead with discipline, to respect the rule of law. And she'd had enough of watching people, especially black women, get dismissed, degraded, and disrespected under the cloak of procedural safety. From a psychological lens, her restraint during the stop wasn't just military discipline, it was cognitive control under threat. Studies show that individuals from marginalized backgrounds often develop heightened emotional regulation to navigate biased environments. That's mental labor most people never see. It's survival, strategy, and self-preservation rolled into one. And for Alana, it had become second nature. But Denton couldn't see that. To him, her calm was arrogance. Her professionalism felt like a challenge. And it's in that emotional mismatch between perceived defiance and actual discipline where most dangerous police encounters begin. Inside the Dayton precinct, the name Brooks surfaced again, this time in the break room. Denton joked about the stop to fellow officer James Rourke. Pulled over some Fed who thought her government plates meant she was untouchable, he said, laughing. Tried to pull rank. Rourke paused. Wait, Brooks? Alana Brooks? Denton raised an eyebrow. Yeah. Why? She's not just some Fed. She's a captain in logistics command. Gave a leadership seminar at the academy last year. I was there. That woman runs global operations. She's no joke. But Denton waved him off. Out here, rank doesn't matter. Except now it did. Because Brooks wasn't just filing a complaint. She was mobilizing networks. Her legal team reached out to the Ohio Attorney General's office. Her complaint was sent to the U.S. Department of Justice under the Civil Rights Division. And within 10 days, a formal civil inquiry had been opened into Officer Denton's conduct during the stop. This is where the gap in policy met the limits of power. According to data from the Stanford Open Policing Project, black drivers are still stopped and searched at higher rates than white drivers. Despite being less likely to possess contraband, the numbers haven't moved much. Cities across America still allow pretextual stops, giving officers wide discretion to pull over drivers based on vague reasoning, just like Denton's claim that Alana drifted between lanes. At the same time, departments nationwide struggle with accountability infrastructure. Many, including Dayton PD, lack real-time Bodycam review protocols. Denton's footage sat unexamined for 3 days. No supervisor checked it. No internal flag was raised. If not for Alana's formal complaint and accompanying footage, it might never have seen the light of day. That's how most injustices disappear. Not in fire, but in apathy. But Denton's shield, the one built on silence and habit, was cracking. Rumors started circulating through the department. Officers noticed the change. A memo about the internal review was quietly sent out. The locker room got quiet when he walked in. He wasn't the predator anymore. He was the liability. And he knew it. But still, he refused to take it seriously. Even when the envelope came, the one marked Lucas County Civil Court, he opened it in the squad car, thinking it was another routine summons. But it wasn't. It was a notice of civil suit. Plaintiff: Captain Alana Brooks. Defendant: Officer Travis Denton. Allegation: unlawful detention, intimidation, abuse of authority, and violation of constitutional rights. Now, the game had changed. The authority he once used as a shield was about to be held under a microscope. And the cameras were still rolling. Officer Denton sat in the squad car, envelope in hand, engine idling in the parking lot. The moment he tore it open, his casual grin faded. This wasn't a traffic court summons. It wasn't a departmental memo. It was a lawsuit filed in Lucas County Civil Court. The plaintiff: Captain Alana Brooks. The allegation: violation of civil rights during a traffic stop. The charge: unlawful detainment, abuse of authority, and intimidation. Inside the precinct, the shift was already underway. But Denton wasn't focused on dispatch calls. He was stuck reading the same lines again and again. The realization began to set in. He wasn't being asked for an explanation. He was being summoned to account. When he stepped into the captain's office that afternoon, he expected a warning, maybe even a slap on the wrist. But what he got instead was a closed door and a long, quiet stare from Commander Aaron Voss, a 30-year veteran with no patience for ego. "You know who she is?" she asked. Denton shrugged, some fed with attitude. "She's a decorated army officer, led humanitarian logistics in Syria, speaks at NATO planning forums. This isn't going away." Still, Denton leaned back in the chair. "I followed procedure." "No," Voss replied. "You followed habit." That distinction mattered. According to recent Justice Department assessments, habits like Denton's pretextual stops based on vague suspicions are at the center of ongoing federal oversight efforts. In 2024 alone, the DOJ expanded consent decrees in cities like Minneapolis and Louisville. The pattern was clear. Departments where officers routinely escalated low-level stops faced systemic scrutiny. And Dayton wasn't far behind. The complaint Alana filed didn't just go to civil court. It reached the State Inspector General's office. Her video-clear, steady, time-stamped ad was now under review by the Civil Rights Division. A preliminary inquiry had already begun. The city's legal team had been alerted. Internal Affairs had reopened Denton's file, and a quiet directive had been issued. Full cooperation with the court. But this wasn't just a legal battle. It was a cultural reckoning. In military circles, Alana's calm under pressure wasn't unusual. It was expected. She had led convoy operations under fire in eastern Ukraine. She had coordinated disaster relief after Hurricane Michael. Her toolkit wasn't just tactics, it was resilience, training, protocol, clarity, under pressure. She wasn't going to yell. She wasn't going to posture. She was going to present facts, follow policy, and let the institution she served do the work. But that was also part of the problem. Because if a woman like Alana disciplined, respected, legally equipped to fight this hard to be heard, what chance did others have? That question lit a fire under the case, and it added a layer of moral weight that viewers, especially online, couldn't ignore. The story wasn't just about one officer abusing power. It was about a system that relied on victims being too tired or too powerless to push back. In interviews with her attorney, Alana made one thing clear. This case isn't about me, it's about precedent. Her legal counsel, Dana Wexler, 52, had handled civil rights cases for nearly 3 decades. She had seen dozens of stops just like this, one of vague suspicion, unnecessary escalation, and nothing done about it. The difference now? They had footage. They had rank. They had a strategy. Wexler crafted the case around constitutional violations, the lack of probable cause, the disproportionate response, the implicit bias demonstrated in Denton's tone and posture. But she also framed it culturally, drawing attention to the double standards facing Black women during police encounters. As Grock's perspective noted, the emotional calculus for women like Alana is different. They're trained to remain calm not just for safety, but for survival. As the court date approached, the case began to spread. Quietly at first, then more broadly. Veterans forums picked it up. Social justice groups began sharing clips. Reddit threads lit up with debate. Some users posted statistics from the Stanford Open Policing Project, showing how Black women are disproportionately stopped and searched despite lower risk profiles. Others focused on Alana's tactical decision to record her use of legal channels. Her composed courtroom presences a blueprint for how to fight back. But not everyone supported her. Denton's defenders began speaking up too. A few local unions claimed he was being targeted for doing his job. That narrative, while common, missed the point. Because this wasn't about one man's job. It was about the line between authority and abuse and what happens when someone brave enough refuses to let it blur. The courtroom was silent the morning Captain Alana Brooks walked in. No media circus, no flashing cameras, just the steady hum of tension. She wore her full dress, uniform pressed to precision. Her insignia gleamed beneath the fluorescence. She didn't enter like someone seeking revenge. She entered like someone delivering a report, just the facts. On the defense side, Officer Travis Denton sat stiff in a dark gray suit. His usual swagger was gone. His jaw was locked, hands folded, eyes fixed forward. The courtroom benches held a mix of quiet supporters and silent observers. Some in uniform, some not, but all watching closely. What was supposed to be a simple civil hearing now carried national weight. Legal scholars had begun weighing in online. Commentators pointed out how rare it was for a military officer to file a civil rights suit stemming from a local police stop. Even rarer, one with video proof from both Bodycam and phone, perfectly aligned. When Alana took the stand, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't waver. She recounted every detail with the same precision she used when briefing top brass. What time she left base, where she stopped for fuel, the exact moment she noticed the flashing lights. Her tone was calm, her words exact. "I followed instructions," she said. "I was not impaired. I was not combative. I complied fully." She described Denton's behavior, his flashlight in her face, the absence of a clear reason for the stop, his demand to exit the vehicle without providing justification. She described how his hand hovered near his holster, how his tone shifted when she mentioned her military status, and how he wrote a citation after she passed the sobriety test. Then came the footage. First, her phone recording, silent, smooth, her voice steady, his tone clipped and aggressive. Then the body cam footage, same encounter, but from his chest-mounted view. It showed the same facts from a different lens. Denton's rigid posture, his visible irritation, his short dismissive answers, his refusal to acknowledge her credentials, the field sobriety test, her perfect execution. In a world filled with noisy accusations, the quiet clarity of video was deafening. The prosecution built their argument around constitutional violations and abuse of discretionary authority. But they also wove in cultural subtext, citing research from the Stanford Open Policing Project. Studies repeatedly show that black drivers, especially black women, are disproportionately subjected to pretextual stops. They're more likely to be pulled over, questioned, and searched often based on subjective interpretation of suspicious behavior. It wasn't just about Alana. It was about the numbers, the patterns, the real-world outcomes of unchecked authority. Denton's attorney, Keith Albright, tried to reframe the situation. He suggested Denton was simply acting out of caution. That night was dark. The vehicle was unfamiliar. He was concerned. "Isn't it fair to say," Albright asked, "that Officer Denton had to prioritize safety for all involved?" Alana met his gaze without flinching. Prioritizing safety does not require ignoring protocol. It does not require dismissing credentials. It does not justify escalation without cause. Then came a moment that hit the room like a shift in air pressure. "Do you believe Officer Denton saw you as a threat?" Albright asked. "I believe," Alana said, "he saw me as someone who wasn't intimidated, and for some people, that's threatening." In the gallery, you could feel the pause. People weren't just watching a trial. They were watching a story unfold that mirrored something larger, something familiar. Then it was Denton's turn. He didn't take the stand to testify. His team knew better. The videos had already done the talking. But the prosecution still had questions for him. From his seat, he was asked point blank, "Why did you demand she step out of the vehicle?" "She looked evasive," he replied. "Did she disobey any commands?" "Number." "Did she threaten you?" "Number." "Were you aware she was a federal officer?" "Not at first." "And once you knew?" He hesitated. "I probably would have handled it differently." That was the moment. The slip. The unguarded truth. The courtroom didn't gasp. No one shouted. But the meaning sank in like a cold wind. Denton hadn't been enforcing law. He had been enforcing ego. His view of authority had been fragile, what psychologists call defensive identity projection. When someone feels their status is being challenged, they double down, not for justice, but for control. It's a common profile in cases where authority escalates unnecessarily. 3 days later, the verdict came in. The jury found in favor of Captain Brooks, unanimously. They ruled that Denton had unlawfully detained her, that he acted outside of protocol, that his actions constituted a violation of her constitutional rights. The court awarded $40,000 in damages. But more importantly, the ruling would be sent to the Department of Justice and Dayton Police for review. It would remain on Denton's permanent record. He sat still as the verdict was read, His attorney leaned over and muttered something about appeals. But Denton didn't respond. He stared ahead, jaw tight, a man no longer untouchable. Outside, Alana stood on the courthouse steps. She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't raise her voice. She just took a deep breath, checked her phone, and walked to her car. The story had already gone viral. But the story wasn't about virality. It was about visibility. Because real accountability doesn't always come with flashing lights. Sometimes it comes dressed in uniform, walking softly, carrying facts. The ruling made headlines the next morning, first on regional legal blogs, then across social media, and eventually into national commentary. The headline that traveled fastest was short and sharp. Army officer wins civil rights case against Ohio cop verdict signals shift in police accountability. But inside Captain Alana Brooks' world, there was no celebration, no press tour, no public statement. After the judge's gavel fell, she didn't wait for applause. She walked quietly down the courthouse steps, nodded once to her attorney, and got in her car. Because for her, the victory wasn't a finish line. It was a reset. The court had awarded her $40,000 in damages. The ruling cited unlawful detainment, abuse of discretion, and violation of her 4th and 14th Amendment rights. More importantly, it mandated that Officer Travis Denton's conduct be submitted to the Department of Justice and to Dayton PD's Internal Oversight Board for review. That meant something. It meant the record would stand. And Denton? His silence spoke volumes. He left the courthouse alone, jacket pulled tight, face shielded from the quiet stares of reporters. He didn't speak. He didn't look back. But what he couldn't outrun was now permanent. He had lost the one thing he'd relied on for years: invisibility. Within days, Dayton PD placed him on administrative leave. The city's Civilian Oversight Commission announced it would conduct a formal review of traffic stop policies, especially concerning pretextual stops and discretion-based searches. The mayor's office issued a statement acknowledging the case and reaffirming a commitment to structural accountability. For a city of under 200,000 people, this wasn't just policy. It was precedent. Across forums and feeds, the story sparked conversation not just about Denton or Brooks, but about the countless encounters that never reached courtrooms. Advocates began sharing the case as a blueprint. Educators used it as a case study in law and criminal justice courses. Veterans reposted Alana's courtroom testimony with comments like, "This is what service looks like outside the field." But not all feedback was supportive. Some law enforcement union reps argued the decision sent a chilling message to officers trying to make split-second calls. In private groups, a few officers called the case overblown or political. But those voices were quieter now, because the video, the unshakable record, had already spoken. This was the kind of story that algorithms love: a composed underdog, a clear abuse of power, an unflinching courtroom reckoning. But viral doesn't mean resolved. And Alana knew that. Because beneath the surface of her calm, she carried what many don't see: the emotional cost of having to prove your worth in moments where others are simply believed. The case reminded her how much of her success depended on her composure, her rank, her legal literacy. But what about those without those tools? That question stayed with her more than any courtroom memory. Grok's insight about the invisible toll of emotional labor hit here. Alana didn't just navigate the legal system. She navigated the internal weight of staying measured in a world that too often sees calm as compliance and self-advocacy as threat. Gemini's policy data showed what her case revealed in real time. Meaningful reform only comes when individual victories lead to institutional reflection. Public discourse had already shifted. Comment threads included real questions about Bodycam footage protocols, about qualified immunity, about whether training alone was enough. And Perplexity's prediction? It had landed. The video, the testimony, the quiet leadership all built a framework others could follow. Weeks later, when Denton's name appeared in an internal bulletin marked "Under Review," no one in the department was surprised. The tone around him had shifted. Conversations stopped when he walked in. His badge didn't carry the same weight. Meanwhile, back at Fort Moore, Alana was back at work. Same routine, same posture, same quiet strength. She didn't need to relive the trial. She didn't need to hold on to the verdict. What mattered was that the record existed. And if someone else, someday, gets pulled over for reasons that feel just as vague and just as wrong, maybe the officer will remember this case. Maybe they'll think twice. Maybe the silence will break. Not with anger, not with shouting, but with quiet, undeniable proof. 2 months after the verdict, Captain Alana Brooks stood at the front of a lecture hall inside Fort Moore. The faces looking back at her were young, eager, and mostly new to the uniform. Some had only been in for a few weeks. Others hadn't yet deployed. They didn't know her from the courtroom. Most hadn't followed the trial. And that was exactly how she preferred it. She wasn't there to talk about lawsuits, traffic stops, or courtroom victories. She was there to talk about something bigger. Leadership. She started with a question. How many of you believe a uniform earns you respect? A few hands went up. Confident, cautious, curious. She nodded, then paused. I understand why you'd think that. But here's the truth. Respect isn't automatic. It's not stitched into fabric. It's not pinned to your chest. It's something you prove every single day. That was the moment the room shifted. Not with noise, but with attention. The kind that settles in when a message lands. The same goes for power, she continued. Whether it's rank, a badge, a title, those things aren't shields. They're responsibilities. And if you can't carry them with discipline, you don't deserve to carry them at all. What she didn't say, but every word hinted at, was that her recent experience had tested everything she believed about that balance. Not just as a soldier, but as a woman, as a black woman in public space. As a leader expected to model restraint in the face of disrespect. Grok's framing of that invisible tightrope was embodied in every syllable. She wasn't lecturing. She was sharing hard-earned truth. Injustice doesn't always look like shouting, she told them. Sometimes it looks like silence, like assumptions, like someone refusing to see you for who you are. One of the recruits leaned forward, eyes locked. When I was pulled over by someone who forgot what his badge meant, I had options. I could have yelled. I could have panicked. I could have let it slide. She let that sit for a second. But I didn't. I documented. I filed. I showed up in court. And I told the truth. The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. Because what she said next was the kind of line that lives long after the speech ends. That officer thought he had the upper hand until he saw my rank. But my rank wasn't the medal on my shoulder. It was how I carried myself. That's the difference. That's leadership. Gemini's research has shown that training alone isn't enough. What shapes institutional culture is mentorship, messaging, repetition, and example. That's what Alana gave them. A living example. No theatrics, no self-promotion, just strength shaped by experience, delivered with precision. As she closed the folder in front of her, she left them with one final thought. Serve with integrity, lead with character, and remember, the uniform doesn't represent you. You represent everyone who came before you and everyone who'll come after. She stepped down from the podium. No applause needed. The message had already landed. And somewhere in that room, a future leader was taking notes not on paper, but in principle.